Welcome to APCUG's Saturday Safari, where we get together each quarter and go on an expedition deep into technology. Today, our presentation is going to continue a theme that we will probably have over and over again, different months, different years, backing up. We can't emphasize enough about backing up. Today, we are excited to have back with us one of our newest presenters, Ewing, who's the president of the Bella Vista Computer Club. And he's going to be sharing some information today on a backup program, which I always pronounce incorrectly because I don't know whether it's EaseUS or EaseUS, but it's the To-Do backup program. So I'll let Joel tell me how I should be saying it correctly and what I can learn about that program. So over to you, Joel.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay, that looks like the right one. Well, first of all, I have no idea how to pronounce it either.
Oh,
I've always called it myself EaseUS to do backup. The fact that the U.S. is capitalized suggests it might be for the United States, but I have no idea. Well, first of all, why another backup tool? Our club has recommended to our members since up through 2023 to use Mainframe Reflect free. That free version is no longer available for download or supported. Now, one of our help clinic people knows how to install it on some member's machine from stuff that he saved, but technically that's probably not quite kosher because I'm sure installing it on a new machine requires a new free license, which is no longer offered. Also, I looked at the license agreement, and it basically says if you have a downloaded copy, you can't give it to somebody else. So the cost of one Mainframe Reflect home license is probably manageable. But like for the help clinic itself, if you were trying to help everybody that came in, we could not share one license with other people. So that could prevent that use. And if you have multiple computers at your home, you are also would be required technically to get a license for each one of those. Now they do have special deals on Mainframe Reflect as well as other backup programs, but that could get expensive. So it'd be nice to have alternatives for people with modest budgets. And I searched some of the sites that had things like the 10 best backups for Windows and found one that included this one, which does have a free version. And if you look at the details, it's from Chengdu Yuo Tech Development Company Limited in Chengdu, China. It was first released in 2009, so this is not a really new program. It's been one that's been under development for a while. And they, of course, have priced versions that have more features. Now, one thing I'll mention up front, and this was a concern to some of our members, actually, this company has a good reputation. But of course, if you worked with highly sensitive information, either business or national data, you might not want to allow all the data on your computer to be handled by software from a company that could be subject to the controls of an adversarial authoritarian government. I don't think for most people that's a real concern. And if they were to start introducing malware at the demand of their government, somebody would discover it eventually, and that would probably be catastrophic to that company. So they have motivations for opposing anything like that. But if you have that as a serious concern, just be aware of that. Here's the website you can, or specifically the URL of their website that you can download it. And if you go to their website and don't go to that specific URL, you do have to hunt to find the free version. So be sure that you're getting the free version as opposed to the free trial of the paid version, although I'm not certain they may actually be the same program. It uses the typical download and install procedure. And during that process, expect and avoid selecting the buttons to upgrade to the non-free version, assuming that you want the free version. Here's what that URL page looks like. There's a very prominent free download button, and also right next to it, the option to upgrade to the paid home version. If you click on this, you then get this window pop up, which has a very prominent button to get the paid version. And then over in small print, there's the download for the free version. So notice that this is the free version, and select that download on the left. And you get the normal response. I was doing this from the Edge browser. When you get done, you get a window that gives you the option to open the file. And if you open the file, it then comes up, do you want this app to make changes to your device? And you have to say yes in order to get it to install. And eventually you get the installation window for the product, and you have to tell it to install now. And it takes a few minutes and puts an application icon on your desktop by default. When you actually start up the application, you get this sort of alarming window. Do you want this app to make changes to your device? Now, if you're doing it for backup, that's kind of an unexpected message, but Make and Reflect has exactly the same reaction. It will ask you if you want to allow it to make changes to your device. I think from empirical evidence that the kind of access that those backup programs need to your drives requires them to get a higher level access, which could be used to make changes to your device. But if you're just doing backups, it doesn't actually make changes. So this doesn't mean that running the app will alter your system unless you're running it to do a standalone recovery, and then you're not doing it from inside Windows. Now, when you actually get past that, the first window I got was another. Would you really like to upgrade? And you have an option of a home and a home version that has more cloud storage. And assuming that you just want to run the program, this is just a window by itself. You hit the normal X to close out that window and proceed. And here is what the actual app window finally looks like. And I'm not sure. I think maybe every time you start it, you may get a pop-up window inviting you to upgrade or giving you an offer for a reduced price upgrade. But you can always just close that window and proceed. Notice there is a login. Well, actually, it says not logged in up here. If you had the paid versions and cloud storage to store backup information, then you would have to log in with whatever your login credentials for the EaseUS site was. But normally, if you're just on the free version, that doesn't make sense because you don't have a login, so just ignore that. You would start out by doing a click on this Create Backup window. And if you do that, well, at that point, I started to go down and eventually got to a point where I found I could not see my drives that I wanted to back up on. So before you do that, go to the Tools option that was up there at the top, and you will see all these options. And I was sort of wondering what all of these little strange things are here. And I think I finally figured it out, although they're not documented anywhere. These are the various features that are not available in the free version, but in the paid version. And I'm not positive, but when I started to click on one of these, it did let me progress a little bit. I didn't want to actually do it, so I didn't go that far. But it's possible that this free version is actually giving you a free trial of these other features as well. I just haven't tried to go far enough to see that. I would like to point out that this is the point that you would want to connect your USB drive that you're going to do the backup on. And if it wasn't connected before you started up the program, you then need to go to Tools and Refresh Disk in order to let this tool, in order to set this application, see the disk you're going to use for backup. Let me make one mention here about the system transfer, because it's some places in their documentation, it's also referred to as the universal recover. You can actually recover to different computer than you use for backing up, provided it is enough similar. And enough similar basically means that Windows has built into it all the drivers that you need for that other computer to work. There are a lot of cases where that is the case. It used to be that you would have to tell this tool, generate the recovery on the actual machine that you were going to use to recover on, to be sure that it had all the drivers it needed. But that's what the system transfer is. That's actually a recover on a incompatible machine that might need a different drivers. But anyway, you get past that point and then click on the create backup. And in this case, I was actually doing this from a machine that I'd already done a backup on. And this is the information on the last backup I did. It puts that up here. And if you do additional backups, I think they'll appear up there as well. I think that this button only appears if you have previous backups, and somehow if you have one of those selected, you can say do a similar backup. I haven't had a chance to actually test that out. Okay, if you say create a backup, the first option you get is what kind of backup, and file basically allows you to back up specific files or directories. Disk allows you to back up selected disk partitions on your local disk drives. OS allows you to back up the partitions associated with the running Windows system. Apps allows you to back up data that's associated with specific apps. And notice it's got that little strange emblem down there. I think that means that that is only available on the paid version or in the free trial version. I select the disk because that's what I'm primarily interested in. I was using Make and Reflect for image backups, and so disk allows you to select all the partitions. For most of you that have a single boot system, I suspect OS would also back up all of the Windows partitions you're interested in. I actually had a laptop that had dual boot with Linux, and if I backed up just the Windows partitions, that didn't really work because the disk boot itself was by default onto my Linux boot, and then the Linux boot allowed me to get the Windows. And I tried restoring that on a different system, and that didn't work to not have that Linux partition with it. If you select the disk backup, in this case, I had a hard disk that had 4 partitions on it. And this was actually a Windows virtual machine. So it was a fairly small drive of only 64 gigabytes. If you want all the partitions to be backed up, you simply check this one little check up at the top for hard disk. And the name of the dump will be based on that selection. That was disk 0, and the dump gets called disk 0. If you just selected a subset of these partitions, then it gets a name like partitions backup, and you have to be careful that you're backing up all the partitions that you really have an interest in. After you've done that and go to the next process, it asks you to select the destination. Now, I was a little intuitively confused by this because everywhere else I had selected either boxes or a button. Now, suddenly what they want you to select is this image. And it just took me a little bit to get past the difference in what I was selecting on there and realize that the image was what you want to select. If you hover over it, you'll see the image size change slightly, and that sort of indicates it is a selectable item. So select on that. And now it asks you what you want to back up and or where you want to back it up to. You can either go to a local drive. If you have a priced version, you have cloud storage at EaseUS, and you can select that. If you have network drives on your home LAN, you can select that. Security zone, notice it's got that little emblem there again. That's a priced feature. I believe that allows you to have a partition that is like what Make Room Reflect will do with you. Make Room Reflect will allow you to have a backup partition that is not seen by anything other than Make Room Reflect, so that malware can't destroy it, even if it's physically online to your hardware. So I haven't tried that out, but I think that's what that is. If you select local drive, you then see a navigation style selection of what's on your local hardware. And if you go down far enough, you'll get to the USB drives. In this case, I had a USB drive that had originally been set up for some of the Windows backups where you had to have a dedicated partition for each different system. And in this particular case, I wanted to put it on what was labeled here, the NTFS-C partition. And that's the partition label. It's not a C drive. It's the fourth of those partitions. And notice that it happens to be the I drive on this particular instance of hardware. And then you click OK. And now it's got a nice little message here that indicates it's time to start the backup. And you click on this and it will actually begin the backup. As it's backing up, it shows you the name of the backup selection, which was this 0, and the progress of it. And it had a little tempting speed up button, which while waiting on it to complete, I clicked on that. And it tells you need to upgrade to the non-free version in order to improve performance. And I suspect that means they do some better optimizing with use of buffers and speed up the access to the hard drives that are being used. Okay. Eventually it'll complete and that'll change to backup successful and have the date and the time of the backup. After backup completed, I went back out to the Windows system and looked at that particular hard drive, USB hard drive partition, and looked to the disk 0 directory, which is where it puts the backups for a disk 0 backup. And under that, you see that the backup is a .pbd file, which is unique to this particular backup. And it has the disk 0 and also the timestamp and the fact that it's a full backup. I actually found that this application, even the free version, does support incremental and differential backups as well, but only if you're doing a scheduled backup, in which case you tell it how often it has to make the full backup versus the non-full backup. V1, I haven't done enough backups to know how that changes. Perhaps every backup gets a new version, or maybe only the ones that follow this same pattern. And after I completed, I got back at some point in the application and it said, oh, you need to make an emergency disk so you can do recovery. It says do recovery easier. Well, if you want to do recovery, period, you got to have one, because if your system is dead, you've got to have a way to do a standalone recover. And this is the way you create the media. You can do a create dial if you have a USB device in that you can create it on. Probably want a memory stick from that. If you didn't have it in, you might have to go back to tools and do that refresh disk after you plug it in. You can put it off until later, but don't wait too long. And I now have seen that it will nag you later if you say later, as opposed to never ask again. So it will ask you periodically if you want to do this. And if you haven't generated it from the particular system that has this instance of the program in it, it will keep on asking you until you tell it never ask again. Okay, there are some backup options. And just before I clicked on this, you have this options out here. You can go out and select some various options there to change the way it does the backup. So Those options, basically, you can change the kind of compression it does. I was backing up a drive. I can't remember how much it saved, but it did save space on it. One of the things that you might want to do, you could enable backup encryption. And if you do that, you can then specify a password. If you have anything that is sensitive on your Windows system that you're backing up, that's probably a good idea. A small external drive could be easily lost or easily stolen if you left it sitting around somewhere in the open. And eventually you're going to want to retire it. If you have sensitive data on there that is not encrypted, you'll then have to do secure erase, which is a pain. With a terabyte or so drive, that may literally take hours or maybe even several days, depending on how big it is. But if you use a sufficiently good key for the encryption, be sure you save it. Otherwise, even you won't be able to get to the data again. So if you're saving it in your password manager, be sure you have alternative ways to look at your password manager if your system is dead. Have a backup system. Somebody else's computer that you can use your USB drive on to inspect your passwords and then to start the backup process on another machine. I try to restore, and to see what it would look like with a dead machine, I tried a completely new test virtual machine that had been set up for Windows 11 with a slightly larger virtual drive, 90 gigabyte rather than 64, because I wanted to prove that you could use this process to clone to a larger hard drive. I connected my USB device with the emergency recovery tool on it, and also the device with the backup file to my virtual machine. And you also may need to modify the machine so that it will actually boot from an emergency USB drive. If you're doing this to a physical machine, you may have to go in and modify the BIOS in some way so that you can change what device it boots from. After a while, booting that restore tool, it comes up with this window and a progress bar down here that shows the loading process, and eventually that will complete, and you get to a window which looks very much like the way the tool looks like if you're running it from Windows. In this case, you have to start by saying, I want to browse to find what I want to recover from, and then it's a local drive on this virtual machine because I connected to that. So you select local drive, and then again, you get one of these navigation windows, and you go down, scroll down far enough to get to the attached USB devices to that machine. And here's my NTFS-C. Notice here, it's a G drive. Don't go by the drive letters, go by the drive label, because in a standalone recovery, it's not necessarily going to be the same letter drive to Windows. And under this drive, here's my disk zero directory. I selected to expand that, and here's the disk zero backup file. It's a full backup, and I selected that, and then click on OK. And now it says, where do you want to recover it to? Well, I want to recover it to the hard drive that's associated with this machine. If you had several hard drives, you would have to select which one. In this case, I want to recover all of the virtual partitions, all of the partitions on my backup to the partitions on my hard disk zero. So I click that little box and then say next. And now it shows you, pardon me, wait a minute, that back up there. That was what partitions you want to recover. So this is actually what's on the backup. And I want to recover all of those partitions, so you click on this. The next step, it shows you what do you want to recover it to? And it shows all of the drives that are connected to my system right now. I could recover it to one of the partitions on that USB drive if I wanted to, but this shows that they all contain stuff that probably wouldn't be a good idea unless I knew what I was wiping out. Here is the main hard drive on this machine. And so I selected that one for the recovery process. And notice it indicates it's unallocated. There aren't any partitions on it at all. Click Next. Now it shows you what it's planning to do. Here's the source. It's 4 partitions on that NTFS-C drive. And my target recovery is going to be on a 90 gigabyte disk 0. And here's what the partitions are going to look like. And notice the old C partition was 63 gig, and the new one is going to be 89. So it is going to expand that. And you click on Proceed, it starts the process, and you get a progress showing how far it's gotten. And eventually it'll finish, and it'll then say recovery completed and tell you the total time. And amazingly, this actually took less time to recover than it did to back up. I'm not quite sure why. Something different between the virtual machines, perhaps, that I didn't realize. Once you're done, you can close the backup program. You get a blank screen. Well, not a blank screen, but it's a screen with no options to click on and no options if you do a right click or a left click. So basically, your only choice at that point is to disconnect the USB devices and reset it to boot from the primary disk 0 and reboot the machine. And I did that on my virtual machine. And by gosh, Windows 11 came up. And just to double check, the first thing I did was go into disk management and look to see what my disk 0 looked like. And sure enough, here is the C drive with 89 gigabytes on it. There used to be some ways in which you could restore partitions under Windows where Windows wouldn't see the full size. And I just wanted to guarantee that it was seeing that full size. And it is. So I had a functionally restored Windows 11 on a different virtual machine, and it appeared to work. Miscellaneous comments. One of the really nice tools I liked in Make Me Reflect that I thought was maybe unique to it was that you could mount a backup file and access individual directories and files that are in the image backup. It turns out that to do backup has the same capability, and it's a feature that's available even in the free version. You basically do a mount, unmount, and that's under the Tools menu. And once you click on this, you will get another window that has backup, and it will show you all the backups that are online. You can select one of those and click to mount it. And then when you're finished looking at that, at the files and directories under that, you can go back to Tools, select Mount, Unmount, and now you'll have 2 tabs that are functional, Backups and Mounts. And you click on the one about mounts, and it will show you the drive you had mounted, and you can then select to unmount it at that point. I couldn't do any direct comparisons of speed between Make Me Reflect and the To-Do backup. I felt it was a little slower, but not enough to be certain. And it's possible that's just because the USB hard drives that I was using was different. The free version doesn't support direct cloning. That was one of the features under Tools that was marked as being a priced function. But if you do a backup and a restore, like I just did in that example, using an intermediate drive for the storage, you get the same end result. It's just that you have to copy the data twice rather than just do it once if you're doing a clone. If you decide you want additional features that requires the non-free version, both EaseUS and Make Me Reflect have special deals for the first year. So if you're comparing prices, be sure to take into account the long-term annual cost. Make Me Reflect has reduced rates for buying a group of 4 licenses, and they also have a lifetime usage option, which if you're going to use it for more than 2 years, is a way to save money. Or if you're going to use it for at least 2 devices, the 4 licenses is actually cheaper on Make Room Reflect. So check out those options and decide which of those may be best. Make Room Reflect also is made in the UK. So if the country of origin is a concern and you're going to buy the price version, that would be another thing in favor of Make Room Reflect, perhaps. And that basically covers what I've got. Any questions?
Hey, Joel, thank you. If you are a fan of Leo Notenboom, he has championed this backup system forever and a day, and he has even written a book about it. He thinks it's the best thing, apparently, that came down the pike. So if you trust Leo, then this would be possibly the free backup or paid for you. Question, do you use the check backup option to make sure the backup image is good?
I haven't at this point. I've just done some very preliminary tests with it, so there are many things I have not tried. So no, I haven't. I just say do it and it does it.
Okay, another teaching presentation. Thank you so much.